Here's a crazy story about a hedge fund manager. It doesn't involve a 50th birthday at the Las Vegas Sphere, nor does it involve buying the world's largest collection of Air Jordans. It involves parenting. He paid someone to teach his kid, wait for it, how to ride a bike. Here's how he justified it. He makes $10 million a year, which is about $3,000 an hour. Now, a bike instructor costs $50 an hour and is way more patient than him. So at the end of the day, the trade-off made sense. Now, I know you'd never do something this crazy, but as hard-charging, ambitious parents, you make these kind of trade-offs all the time. Maybe you miss bath time for a networking dinner, or you punch out a few emails during your kid's recital, or you miss that milestone birthday because you were out fundraising. Now, we can all agree that ambition is an incredible character trait, but too much of a good thing? Could that mess up your kids? In this episode of the Examine Life podcast, I interview serial entrepreneur and mother of three, Amanda Getz. We discuss why it's so hard to set boundaries, how healthy ambition means actually dealing with your own internal, and the myths of success. But before we jump in, if you're an ambitious parent who struggles with making these trade-offs, we have a group coaching program for folks like you. Make sure you check out radreads.co/coaching. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Amanda, if you were to pick an adjective to describe your ambition. So my ambition, I have X ambition. What adjective would you use to describe it?
Insatiable.
Oh, damn. I was thinking about this question. That's the word I was going to use.
Really?
Yeah. I was thinking about it this morning.
I feel like that is what most ambitious people would say, because ambition is this kind of moving target, right? Like it truly is a thirst for the journey. There really is no mountain. Like there's no peak. It is this insatiable drive to just keep growing and testing what your limits are. So it makes sense that we would come up with the same word.
Oh, wow. Insatiable. Yeah, I was thinking of also for myself, untethered or unhinged.
Yeah.
I think I'm no longer in the unhinged phase. When you think of the health, like if you were thinking about your ambition on a healthiness scale, like 10 being it's like super healthy, like balanced and all that. 1 being like you cope and there's all this. How do you think of the healthiness of this insatiable ambition of yours?
It's definitely been a journey for sure. I mean, with each startup, you tie less and less of your identity to it. Yeah. House of Wise was an interesting chapter for my life because I launched a company that was really centered on female empowerment as I'm coming out of a divorce. And so much of my identity was tied into that company and that brand. And so maybe the score I would have given myself then would have been very unhealthy. Now, I set so much more boundaries to my work. I hold things with an open hand. If it doesn't happen, I kind of let it go. Like I have a funny story. Back in summer of last year, I got a book agent and I spent 6 months writing a proposal, working with my agent on it. We sent it out and the deadline was December 1st. And like the week before, I'm texting her and I'm like, hey, we haven't heard from anyone. And she's like, that's normal. People literally will let you know by the deadline. December 1st, I wake up. I totally forgot it was the deadline. I go about my day. I go for a long walk. I'm not even thinking about it. I sit down to do emails because Friday afternoon is when I do my emails. And I sit down and I see her name in my inbox. And I was like, oh, must not have happened. I haven't heard from her today. Literally 10 minutes later, she calls me to tell me I got it was an amazing book deal and with the publisher I wanted. And I was just like, oh, thank you. But I was just like, oh, I have gotten to this place where I just will continue to work hard and the right things will come into my path because of it. And so I feel way more clicked in to I'm aligning my work with what truly lights me up, which is writing. And I know that if I continue to do the things that are lighting me up, think the right things will happen. So
Yeah. Congratulations.
okay.
That's awesome. I can't wait for that book.
Yep.
And I wonder, so a lot of people, there'll be people listening that have heard you describe your pedigree and your background, and they're going to say, like, easy for you to say, because,
Eh,
you've checked all these boxes that, from the outside looking in are high status, high ambition boxes. What do you say to that person? Maybe they're earlier in their
Let's
career journey, or they just have had a string of, bad luck or bad circumstance or health challenges. What do you say to the person that's like, I don't ever, easy for you to say, I don't see myself getting there.
First thing I'll say is I think the same thing about people. Like, I
Mhm,
will think that about the people that are 10 steps ahead of me. I'm like, yeah, it's so easy for you to talk about making $1 million
mhm,
in 2 months. And like, you constantly are thinking about what someone's tool set is and that you don't have those tools.
mhm,
Your toolbox is empty. And like, for me, I would just say, like, I get why you feel that way because I've felt that way most
mhm,
of my life. Like, I grew up, my dad's like the town plumber. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Like, I went to college and people like had AP credit. And I was like, what's AP credit?
uh,
And, I always have felt behind. And I would just remind everyone that that's your superpower. You can either
mhm,
ruminate on that and just keep fixating on the fact that you're behind, or
mhm,
you use that as fuel to just keep going. And to me, I've always just chosen that chip on my shoulder to just be fuel. And then the
uh,
second thing I'd say is, like, I have on paper failed so
uh,
many times.
mhm,
And like my first startup failed.
mhm,
But I made so many connections like that. Trying to raise money for that startup put me in a room where I was going to Union Square Ventures every week for a, female founder brunch. I Nothing happened with that company. I went on, but those people I met through that brunch helped me with House of Wise. And so
mhm,
I like, on paper, you may look at my pedigree and hear that story, but there's so many failures that I went through that then kind of built up that next platform that I could build from at the next
mhm,
time. So if you let someone else's story stop
yeah.
you, you're missing the chance to fail, which is the reason why I am where I am today.
Yeah, beautiful. And I would also, one thing that helps me, because I'm always looking ahead. People are like, oh, I want to,
Yeah.
have whatever 50,000 newsletter followers, or
Right.
this many this, and I'm looking at, I mean, our mutuals, and like, wait, you add 50,000. Like, there was a
Yeah.
creator who I spoke to who added 100,000 newsletter subscribers in one weekend. I'm like, it took me 9 years to get 50,000. And so, like,
Like,
yeah, it was just, it had to do with a very successful book launch. So all the stars aligning on the book
exactly.
launch. And that's the thing, you stay in the game long enough, that this, there's that state, what is it? Luck is the intersection of opportunity and preparation,
Mhm.
or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, and staying in the game. Um, I'd love to go back to childhood, Amanda,
Ugh.
because, the you describe your parents and the roles that they played in your life, the jobs that they had. Did you remember kind of the early traces of ambition as a child?
I mean, yes. I growing up, I was alone a lot because I grew up on a farm, and my my brother's way older than me, and so I kind of had like an only child life. And I constantly had this like, I would make up so many games. I was constantly on the farm playing like any game you can imagine. I'm like thinking of it in my head. And so I've always like been thinking about bigger things and what could I create and add. And then fast forward to high school, high school for me was an interesting thing because I was like, this is going to sound super humble, like braggy. So I'm just going to say that I'm very aware, but like, I was valedictorian. And then like, not only was I student council president, but I was also on the state board of student council, like to
Wow.
manage all of the student councils for the state of Illinois. And school just was like, I was very like antsy. Like classes felt very easy. And so I had this
Mhm.
guidance counselor, Mr. B, who's since passed, but he was so formative in my life because he literally set up a space for me in his office. And when I would go to class, I'd go do the home, like do whatever test I needed to do. And I would be very fast at it. And so then the teachers would just let me go and I would have like an office and I would help him come up with ways to like make the school run better or like things
Oh,
we could do for the student council. And I, he was the person who saw me, like truly saw me. And I was going to follow my high school boyfriend to a small school and just go play basketball and do my thing and follow him. And this man sat me down and was like, if you do not go to, a big school and push yourself, you're going to regret it. And
mm,
he pushed me. And so I say all this to be like, I always knew I was different because of the way I thought. And I was always like
mhm,
asking a ton of questions,
mm,
but I needed someone to reflect that for me. And the crazy thing is, fast forward to this like creator journey.
mm,
Here I am feeling like I'm meant for something bigger. I want to create something. I want to write. I want to share all this stuff that I've spent 20 years learning. It took Justin Welsh, like sitting on a call with him, literally mirroring back, you need to do this. Like, you need to
mm.
go, like, you can do this. That I was
Yeah.
like, huh, maybe I should do this. And
Mm,
you need that sometimes, no matter where you are in your journey. So that's been such an important piece of my puzzle is just making sure I'm surrounding myself with people that are further ahead in their journey, that
yeah.
see me and can reflect back to me and validate me because it's something that I think we all need when we're stepping out of our comfort zone.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm picturing you on the farm, just coming up with these elaborate games
Oh my
out of
gosh.
boredom and loneliness, or being on your own.
No, it was lonely
Um,
for sure,
eh,
but I had a lot of imaginary friends.
and then also again, if someone observes you, like I said, our parasocial relationship on social media, basically, and they're like, this doesn't look like someone who needs to be sat down, at this phase of her life and say, you need to do this. I see you. I believe in you.
Yep,
And so I guess reaffirming the point that you said earlier is of like, what you may see on the outside is not what people, the thing. And I also tell people in our shoes, so, that do that for someone else, someone
exactly.
younger than you, someone earlier than you, because you were that person
Yeah.
um, before. I want to go back. Where did you said something? Chip on the shoulder, chip on my shoulder is a source of motivation. I'm paraphrasing
Yeah,
a
yeah.
bit. When did that first chip? Like, what was the first chip on your shoulder? Where you're like, I need to show people what I'm capable of.
Oh, man, that's a great question. I so we'll see if this is gonna go well, but I'm gonna share it anyway. Um, so Ernst& and Young was a fascinating experience for me because I graduated from college early. Here I am, a 20-year-old blonde. In college, I had 4 jobs in college, and one of them was like a Hooters waitress. So it's like I I go into corporate America and here I am, like I'm wearing a suit every day. I am ready to be taken seriously. I have ideas, like I want to be in the room. And it was my first wake up call of like how I was going to be perceived in corporate America. And I was sent on like, I would go on the like boondoggle trips and I would get invited to like dinners and stuff. And I realized quickly, I was like, I don't know if this is all for my brain here.
Um,
And so it was this like it lit a fire in me to like almost really have to lead with my brain for everything and to overcompensate for that. And I felt this like, I am going to prove to you that I have so much value to give, that I'm going to make you hear me and not just see me. And that really was like a source of like fuel. And really, I think it's why Twitter is probably my primary platform too, because I know that my growth on that platform is because of my words. And so that's really powerful for me. I think over time, you know, as a woman, and you kind of settle into like who you are and you become comfortable with who you are, that stuff wears away. You don't feel that as much. But that was really a big moment in my early career that was very formative.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I was reading the journal, Wall Street Journal yesterday, and I didn't read the entire article, but there was something that's like something that along the lines of it's good to be a high status person, and the way one becomes a high status person is actually really bad. Women who do what it takes to become high status get perceived really badly. You know, it's like the classic like too assertive, too bitchy, too all
Right.
that. And then it was I'll try to pull it up and put it in the show notes and send it to you. But it was basically like you're like screwed in either direction. Like you
are.
need to be high status to get a lot of these benefits, but the pathway to becoming high status, you're getting rocks thrown at you the entire way.
Yeah, it's tough for sure. Like I remember, like I'm a naturally just bubbly Midwest. Like I genuinely like am a happy person. I want to like go in and when I meet someone, I want to like get to know them and I'll ask them a bunch of questions. And I realized quickly that like, oh, that can sometimes be reflected back as like, oh, I'm flirting with you, or I'm creating this like different type of energy exchange. And so I had to really like make myself colder to go, which felt so out of alignment.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's like I had to go in and be like, no, this is business. And I had to really accept that I was going to have different characters in my journey. And
Yeah.
this is really what I'm writing about in my book, is that I've accepted that I have this cast of characters that I play, and that doesn't make me, you know, not in alignment when I'm
Yeah.
playing one of those characters. Like when I'm in business, I am not as like warm and bubbly and maternal and all of these things, because of that's what that
Yeah.
character needs to achieve their goals. But
Yeah.
then how I am with my partner, I am like a golden retriever with my partner, but like a pit bull at work.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I think as women, we struggle with that dichotomy, that tension. And I'm trying to help women understand that that's
Yeah.
okay, that you have to kind of separate these identities, because it's really impossible to merge them into one person and say like, oh, I'm in alignment.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's that's round two of our podcast right
Yeah.
there. Because I feel a tiniest version of that as an Asian man, where
Like,
it's like the starting point is you're not assertive. And so people in corporate, you'll get steamrolled by more
yeah.
aggressive alphas, right? Like Asian men are not perceived as alphas.
Do you feel like
And
that made you like overcompensate in that?
yeah, well, in two ways. Yes, I've always, I was as much like a scrawny kid growing up. So literally like, and we grew up lower middle class in New York. So I've always been used to physically walking around with my head on a swivel, just like for safety reasons.
Mhm.
And then ironically, or sadly, tragically, you get to corporate America and I was like,
Yeah.
head's always on a swivel. And so I always like, but in the same way, and I think this is where you and I are, one of the many ways we're kindred spirits, is that like, I jokingly call myself a squishy love ball. That's like my version of
Yeah.
the golden
Yeah.
retriever. It's just, I just love people. I want people to smile.
Same.
I want people to be happy. I don't want to fight. I don't want to play defense all the time. I don't want to watch my back, but I had to step into this persona
Yep.
and Wall Street, which like, you fuck with me, I will fucking
Yeah.
crush you. Like,
Yeah.
but like, I didn't want it to come out. But it had to come
Yeah.
out sometimes for my own, I guess, career safety. And I think then I just like, fuck this. I'm too old for this shit. Like,
Yeah.
I'm opting out of this world where I need to be this way. Like, there's still other ways that I need to show up. So thanks for sharing that. I think not enough people, this audience is 65% male, so definitely not enough men hear what you just said. But I suspect not a lot of women hear it as well either. So it's thank you for putting that out there.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, look, it's something I think about all the time. I remember early at my time at the Knot, I was going on my first work trip. I was managing a team in Austin, and I was such good, like two great work friends. And I was married at the time, and um, it was two work friends, and we were meeting up with other people on our team. And look, I've worked in tech my whole life. I'm usually tech and VC and all that. I'm used to being like the only female in the room, and I grew up with 7 guys, and I was an athlete my whole life. I'm very comfortable being around a bunch of dudes and just hanging. And they all got an Airbnb, and I was like pumped. I'm like, this is gonna be so fun. We're gonna like, shoot the shit. And one of their wives said I like was very uncomfortable me staying at the Airbnb. And I realized that was like an aha moment. And I still like this still happens to this day where
the Mike Pence rule applied
you're
to Airbnbs.
excluded. Yeah. And I'm just being very transparent and candid.
Yeah.
I don't know how to solve for that one because I know like, and rightfully so, like respecting everyone's comfort and boundaries. But like as a woman, how do you get into those circles and those conversations that happen after the meeting, back at the Airbnb when everyone's shooting the shit, on the trip that everybody's going on, the mastermind? That's the thing that I'm like, I don't know what that solution is,
No, I think part of the solution is putting it out there, because I think it's a huge blind spot for a lot of people, and I'll speak for men, that like they don't even realize what you just said, right? Many of us. And so maybe not the solution, but the tip of the spear in the solution. So thank you again for educating us all, myself included. Let's jump into our question. I mean, I said, we could do like 3 podcasts.
I know.
So does ambition make you a bad parent? What do you think?
So, gosh, you asked this, and I'm like, this is such a good question, because at the surface face value, I want to say no. And but like then I always want to like check myself and say, let's really think about this from a few angles. So I don't think ambition inherently makes you a bad parent. It's everything I talk about, everything I do is about the inner work stuff.
Yeah.
So understanding what is driving you in that ambition and how that ambition is coming to life in your prioritization, boundaries or lack thereof, and the story you tell yourself about ambition. Because one of the biggest, I would say, pitfalls of a highly ambitious person, and I'll share this candidly, of, in my marriage, my ex high achiever founder going after it, and the story he told himself was that he was doing it for his family. But he wasn't around, and I didn't have a partner, and his brain was always on every other thing. And, I was alone a lot. And so, but then there's like my scenario where my kids have been a part of my founder journey, and my daughters feel a part of it. Like my daughter invited me to career day so I could talk about writing the book. And she's like, my mommy is going to be an author. And So I think that it has to do with the story you tell yourself about ambition
Mm,
and how it's affecting the relationships. And if you don't
mm,
have the priorities in check and the boundaries in check, then yes, ambition can
mm,
make you a bad parent. But
mm,
there's the, excuse me, flip side, which is I didn't see like having a stay at home mom who really waited on my dad, was there, made sure all the food was there, made sure that he had everything he needed, taught me some really unhealthy programming of what a
mm,
relationship should be. And so I feel bad saying like lack of ambition because I
mm,
think she was very content with her world. And this is no diss to her, but her not showing me what it meant to balance having a marriage and a career set me up for failure and burnout on so many levels and weak boundaries because
mm,
I didn't stand up in my marriage for what did equality look like? What did it look like to share the workload while I had a career? So for me, my ambition and my ability to like advocate for myself and push towards my goals is now setting my daughters up for the boundaries that they'll need to set and equality that they're going to seek in partnerships. So I
yeah.
think that there's two sides to that coin for sure.
Well, wow. Gosh, where do we beautifully said. Where do we go from there? Maybe one thing I'll reflect back as I think of my next question is that story about I'm doing it for my family.
Yeah.
And I'll speak for myself. Obviously, I don't know your ex, so these are all my words. But
Yeah.
as I've become older, I've become much more aware of kind of weird, twisted self justifications that I make to justify certain behaviors. And I'll call out this, like, I'm doing this for my family, typically, not always, but, in this audience, typically said from a man. And I'll call it out because I'll say it I've said this to my wife, or I've thought this to my wife sometimes when I've been defensive,
Mhm.
the common thing, like, you work too hard, you're not present. And then I'm like, I'm doing this for our family. And
Mhm.
then she'd say, I don't want, what's this, right? I don't
Yeah.
want whatever the thing you're striving for is like, we're good. Like, our
Yeah.
family's good. We don't want more houses, more. We just want to feel financially secure and have you around and present. And definitely, I've made tremendous amount of strides there. But what I've learned in myself, and I'm curious what you think, I've learned that there's this part of ambition that at first, it's almost like a version of Maslow's hierarchy, which is like,
Yeah.
I want to just like I want to feel financially secure, which,
Right.
by the way, is this whole
Yeah.
financial security is a very moving. Our podcast talks a lot about how financial security is a moving target.
For sure.
Um, then, though, there's like, if you continue to take Maslow's hierarchy, there's kind of belonging, feeling loved, and obviously the tip, self-actualization.
Mhm.
And it's like, I can say that I'm ambitious for my family to cover like the basic needs plus part, let's say,
Yeah.
529 plans. But when I'm using work as a means of self-actualization, which I do, and you and I
Mhm.
particularly do because we've kind of created work around ourselves,
Yep.
then I can't turn to my family and be like, I'm doing this for the family. It's like, dude, you're fucking gaslighting them. You are doing this because it feels good, whatever need that you have. And for me, it's it's a need to feel seen. It's a
Yep.
need to feel validated.
Yep.
It's like ego nourishment. That is not. That's 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 the bad part of ambition for my family.
Well,
And the thing is, it's like not a clear, like, I kind of like bounce
right.
back and forth between those.
Well, what I would kind of hold space for is that it's an and, not an or. And I think
Mm,
where it's a slippery slope is when it's an or. Like you say, no,
mm,
I'm just doing it for the family. And you don't acknowledge the the things that you're getting that are filling your gaps.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Like, we all have gaps. Like, we all have that shadow part of ourselves that are, something wasn't quite fulfilled that we needed as a child that we're still trying to fill as an
hmm
adult. And that's okay. We all have that. And so, where we have to get to is a place of like, it's meeting these needs, but it's also meeting these needs. And what are my boundaries so that one isn't overcoming the other? And
hmm
it's okay. Like, you having needs is totally okay and valid. And the fact that you get those needs met from what you're doing is totally okay.
hmm
It's just making sure that we all acknowledge everyone else, that like our decisions have a blast radius, like what we're doing has like an impact on other people, and checking in. And it's like, okay, we have this container of a relationship. What are our needs of a relationship? Where do they butt up against my needs? And what are our boundaries? And that's
hmm
truly like all we can do with having such high ambition and navigating other people's needs and how our ambitions affecting them.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for pointing that out because I can be hard on myself that it's kind of this either
Yeah.
or trade off, which is kind of like the whole thing of like work life balance, right? There's not like a balance. There's this some cleaner integration or healthier integration. You said something that everyone has these needs and they're not filled by some of them went unfilled and
Yeah.
some of them trace back to childhood. Do you think that ambition can ever bridge that gap, or is it like alcohol in a sense where it like promises that it can, but at the end of the day it always falls short?
That's a good question. I think that shadow work, which is what we're talking about,
hmm
it's the stuff that's constantly in your subconscious that drives you,
hmm
right? Like, we want to be making choices and having emotions from our logical part of our brain, but
hmm
in the conscious part of our brain. But the sad truth is that, and my therapist Macy has this amazing like visual. She always says like, you know, at any time you're driving a bus, an adult version of you, current you, needs to be driving the bus. But what happens is you have all these past versions of you that, 6-year-old you, let's say 6-year-old Amanda is really worried about being alone. And
hmm
so if she gets wind that we might be starting to feel alone in something, she's going to grab the wheel and go to fear of abandonment town and do whatever she can to make sure that we're not going to be alone. And once I started to like make that subconscious work
Yeah.
conscious, I no longer let that fear of abandonment drive my decision
Mm,
making.
yeah.
And that to me is like, when you talk about like, is ambition filling those gaps? It's like the first part of that is just understanding what those gaps are in your subconscious,
Who's
and
driving the
then
bus?
say like, wait, I'm feeling like I'm keep making these bad decisions, or I keep doing these things. Like, who keeps driving the bus? And in
hmm
those moments when you recognize that it's like a past version of you, junior high you, or like, like Wall Street you who felt that way, like, okay, I need to tell him I've got this. Like,
Yeah.
current me has got this. And
Mm,
so for me, ambition, when I didn't know that shadow stuff and I wasn't
yeah.
aware of all that stuff, ambition was my drug
Mhm.
to, okay, I will earn everyone's love. I will become the best employee. I will become the best whatever. Now that's not, I still have that same ambition. I want to
Yeah.
be the best, but it's not coming from that place anymore,
Yeah.
you know?
Beautiful. What's so what is it? Just years of Jungian therapy? Is that
It's a lot of therapy. Yeah, it's just
Mhm.
a
Is it a
lot.
specific modality? Because you mentioned shadow work, which I've heard of, but it's I haven't heard it mentioned so directly. Is that like a specific modality, or just the way you and your therapist talk about it, if you're comfortable sharing?
Oh, yeah, I'm an open book. So there's really, I break therapy into, just to make it very simple in like human terms, there's two types of therapy. There's talk therapy and there's what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. So
Hmm.
talk therapy is very like what you see in the movies, like lay on a couch, tell
Yeah.
me your childhood, how does that make you feel? Like it's very you kind of just talking through things. Talk therapy is really about tracing everything back to the why. Why do you feel that way? What happened in your childhood? Kind of Freudian. On the other side, cognitive behavioral therapy is very what focused, tool focused. So, okay, you
Mm.
know what your stuff is. But for me, like after years of talk therapy, I knew what my stuff is, but I still was repeating the patterns. I
Yeah.
didn't have the tools. So awareness is kind of the first step in a journey in connecting it back to like everything is connected back to something like your relationship with money,
Yeah.
your relationship with love, your ability to receive love. Like all of this stuff is traced back to our programming and
Are you
how
in
our
my brain right
software.
now?
Right. And then you got to then take it to the next step and say, cool, what are tools to stop myself when I'm repeating these things? And that's my therapist now. Like she doesn't want me to be in therapy forever. I
Yeah.
just love therapy because I love learning the tools and how to like how different, ways of framing something. Um, but I was like, cool, I know all this stuff. But she was like, let's get you the tools so you can like actually get to the goal you want. Like I was single for 6 years after my divorce. I was like, I think I'm ready to find love, but I have all this stuff from past that I need to now make sure that I don't bring into the present. So she's
Mhm.
just been wonderful and kind of helping me build that tool set.
Beautiful. You talk a lot about boundaries. So what are the boundaries that you didn't have firmly in place, that now kind of give you that healthy relationship with ambition?
Setting my non-negotiables has been like the number one thing. And this doesn't have to be rocket science. It's
Mm.
just what are my non-negotiables in a day? Okay, my non-negotiables are I want some kind of movement every single day, whether that's going to the gym, working out with a trainer. I do not skip those things. Okay, that's one non-negotiable. It's another non-negotiable. I end work at 5 every day. That's my
Mm.
non-negotiable because whether I have the kids or not, I either need to pour into myself, pour into my partner, pour into my kids. Like that's a non-negotiable. So even just starting with those two
Yeah.
non-negotiables, if I hold on to those, then everything else feels manageable in my day. Now
Mm.
I have a non-negotiable of like 5 to 7 a.m. I write because I'm writing this book and that's when my brain is just the most clear. So
Mhm.
that's a non-negotiable. So if that has its own domino effect, because if that's a non-negotiable in my day, then I have to go to bed at 9 p.m. And that's a
Mhm.
non-negotiable. And so it has all of these ripple effects, but to anyone that's really struggling with boundaries and burnout, and start with one. What is
Yeah.
one non-negotiable for your day that
Mm.
you believe will kind of have that domino
Yeah.
effect for the rest of the day? Some people just like it has to be like if I take vitamins in the morning, it makes
Yeah.
me feel like the rest of the day I make better decisions for my
Mhm.
food, for my body, etc. Like what is that one thing? I can't
Yeah.
remember what I know in Atomic Habits he calls it something, but
Oh,
there's a
yeah. The keystone habit, I think.
yeah, yeah, so it's a keystone habit.
Yeah. The one habit that makes all the other ones snap into place. Well, a
Yeah.
simple one for me is, so I usually wake up at about 7.
Mhm.
And the one for me is not to check any
Yeah,
like communications until 8. 'Cause
yeah,
that's when my kids go to school. But it has all these ripple effects because I'm
yep.
present with them for breakfast, which is, by the way, well, our kids are still at the age where they're like cute at breakfast. I think, like, in a
They're
couple of
still
years they're gonna
sleepy
be
faced. Yeah.
yeah, in a couple of years they're gonna be like curmudgeon-y, and at breakfast. Like, why'd you wake me up so early?
Yep.
But
But that's a
yeah,
beautiful one because that
and it's
sets
so
your
simple.
tone. Yeah.
It sets the pace. It's kind of like the make your bed. It's like my version of make your bed
Yep.
because it's just like you enter with a clean mind. When you think about what it means to be a successful parent, so I think about a question I've been thinking about. It's like your kids leave the house. Let's say they, do traditional kind of 4-year college. So they leave the house at 18. What do you want to say? Like what are your kids like? What do they embody at 18 when you're like, I did a good job. I did a
If
great
we,
job.
that's a great question. It's so funny. Yesterday, my daughter came home and she got this Do the Right Thing award at school.
Mm,
Shout out Lincoln. I now have a bumper sticker on my car, which I was
yeah,
like,
Lincoln.
she literally was like, Mom, I got a bumper sticker. I was like, oh, okay,
Uh,
we're gonna put that on the car. But so I think it's two things. The first is they're content with who they are and
yeah.
they are curious about who they're becoming. So this more like, I think so many of people in our generation, because we were raised by a generation of people who didn't do the inner work. They,
Yeah.
and so we constantly were seeking external signals of approval and praise and validation. And so I think like that would be that, like, they're not seeking external
Mm,
validation for who they are, who they're becoming. I mean, my kids watch me, like, I learned that I was bisexual after my divorce, and I
mm,
went through a phase of, like, I had a girlfriend for a while, and I did not share that at all, like, publicly, because it was my own journey. But, like, my daughters have watched me kind of go through this phase of, like, "Hey, I don't know who I am, and that's okay,
um,
but I'm content with, like, learning and giving myself space to figure that out." And
yeah.
so to me, it's like, I want them to know that they're gonna evolve, they're gonna grow, they're gonna change their mind, and all of it's okay. Like, I just don't want them to, like, shame and guilt themselves throughout that journey.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Wow. Ooh, there's so much there, especially, we have two we have girls. I have two
Yeah,
girls the same age as yours. I live in a place, living in LA, which has elements of
yeah,
superficiality, maybe
for
just
sure.
to say it in a very politically
Yeah,
correct way. I wonder because you had a path, college onwards, where you went to college, you presumably did very well in college. You got this kind of high profile corporate job, high status job. How do you think of, because for our generation, maybe this doesn't apply to you, but for me, it was like that was the path to happiness. It was
mhm,
like go to a good 4-year program and get a good job that pays you
right.
well. And like, how do you think of that path for
The
your
kids,
kids? And I'll just
I
add a
think about
caveat,
that.
an asterisk, because you and I live in communities. We both lived in New York for many years. We live in communities where our peers right now, with the age kids that we have, 10 and 8, are fast tracking something.
Mhm.
And I feel a lot of tension because I recognize the benefits. I'm like eyes wide open. There was so many fucking benefits for me going to Yale, for me working on Wall Street, ranging from financial security to high status to doors
Yeah,
open to this day
yeah,
for this job that I'm doing. And at the same time, I see a lot of my peers who are on that track who are miserable.
yeah,
And so I want them to have the option for that track, but I definitely don't want to impose it on them. But there needs to be some like parental, like, sometimes you got to push the kids to eat broccoli. Like they might not know that
no.
that track is an option. I don't know. I struggle with that a lot.
I Look, there's no right answer. Being a parent is, like, the biggest, like, mind fuck in the whole
Yeah.
world. Here's I'll share a story, and I will find who said this first because it's
Okay.
not my story. So there's a story of a fisherman in a village,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you know this. Okay, maybe you've
Yes.
shared this
No,
before, but
go ahead and share it.
okay. So a fisherman in a village, he goes and catches fish, he sells it, and then he's, he goes surfing and does his thing. I might butcher it, but businessman comes to his village and is like, if you do this thing, you can, hire more fishermen and you can build a whole network of fishermen and then you can grow it and make more money. And then he's like, yeah, and then what? And then you can, sell that and go make more money and build an even bigger empire. He's like, yeah, and then what? And then the next thing he says is, well, then you can retire and you can surf and you can spend time with your family. He's like, so what I'm doing now, I surf and I spend time with my family. And so at the end of the day, for me, two things. One is like, look, I was intrinsically motivated to do all the stuff that I've ever done. My parents, I remember touring college campuses, they just dropped me off and they were like, "Okay, let us know how it goes." And like everybody else's parents were there taking notes. And I'm like, what is happening? I'm just so by myself right now. So I knew that this was all coming from inside of me for my own reasons, but I need it to come from inside of my kids and pull them towards what they want to be pulled towards. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I want them to just do the life that's going to make them happy. And I don't want to push them. Like I have loved every step of my career, whether it's like pushing and raising capital and like meeting people and networking and playing the game. I fucking love it. But like other people who see my life, they're like, that's exhausting. And I don't want it. And I don't want them to have it. And so my kids have seen what my life has been like. I have a feeling, and this is the joy of having 3 kids.
Yeah.
I can see a few of them being drawn to what I do. And then there's one of them that rejects it. And
Yeah.
I know that they're going to be more artistic and doing their own thing. And so it's funny because as they get older, you start to see where they light up. And I'm just going to follow that light as a parent.
Beautiful. Amanda, there's no better way to end this conversation than that mic drop moment. So, I want to thank you. Selfishly, I created this podcast to basically enable me to talk through these questions with other smart, thoughtful people. That's why it's called the Examined Life podcast. So I thank you truly. I mean, it's such a great first hang. After all the years, I learned so much. You really are a wise sage, and I know that our listeners are really going to appreciate it. Tell us where where can they go find you? I know you're everywhere, and we'll put all the links in the show notes. But
I'm most active on Twitter and LinkedIn. Twitter is a lot more of my like reflex where I'm spending a lot of time. But my newsletter is where I'm taking all this stuff that I learned through therapy. I really try to make all these things that I've learned in 20 years of doing this work accessible to people and digestible. So I have a weekly newsletter, goes out every Thursday. Actually, today's edition was around navigating tough times and how to do it. You can go to amandagetz.com and sign up for the newsletter.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda.
You're so welcome. This was so amazing. It was fun talking to you.